On March 14, 1923, Sheriff Elwood Crane responded to reports of disturbing sounds at the Hartley farmhouse in Augusta County, Virginia. The official report noted unnatural wailing. What he discovered behind those doors would remain sealed for 50 years. Before we dive into the story, if you're drawn to the darkest corners of American history, the cases that communities tried to forget, then you're in the right place. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss these spine-chilling revelations. And after you've subscribed, write in the comments where you're watching from and what brought you here today. Now let's continue with the story. The Hartley property sat 3 miles outside Churchville, accessible only by a rutted dirt road that became impassable during winter rains. Neighbors described it as a place where time had stopped, where the same 3 figures could be seen working the tobacco fields in identical formations, moving with such synchronization that witnesses reported feeling unsettled watching them. Sheriff Crane had served Augusta County for 11 years, but nothing in his experience prepared him for what awaited. He brought Deputy Marcus Wendell and Dr. Harold Vance, the county physician, whose presence was standard procedure for welfare checks. The March afternoon was unseasonably warm, and as their automobile struggled up the final approach, Crane noted the absence of any livestock sounds, any signs of normal farm activity. The farmhouse itself appeared structurally sound, but neglected. Paint peeled from clapboard siding. Windows, though intact, were covered with heavy curtains that blocked any view inside. The porch sagged under accumulated debris, newspapers dating back years, broken furniture that had never been discarded. Crane knocked firmly on the door. The sound echoed through the structure, followed by absolute silence. Then came movement, footsteps, but strange, too synchronized, too numerous for a single person. When the door opened, 3 identical faces stared out at him. The men were identical in every conceivable way, not just in appearance, but in posture, expression, even the angle at which they held their heads. "Lester, Walter, and Vernon Hartley," the 3 said in perfect unison, their voices creating an unsettling harmony. Behind them, visible in the dim interior, Crane glimpsed a 4th figure, a woman, gray-haired and thin, watching from the shadows. The smell that emanated from the house made Dr. Vance step backward involuntarily. It was not merely the odor of unwashed bodies or poor sanitation. It carried something else, something that suggested profound wrongness. "We need to come inside," Crane said, his hand instinctively moving toward his service revolver. The brothers looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them, then stepped aside with identical movements. What Sheriff Crane documented in his initial report used careful clinical language, words like unsanitary conditions and require intervention. But the notes he kept privately, discovered decades later in his grandson's attic, told a different story. They spoke of horror beyond his vocabulary, of a family arrangement that defied his understanding of human nature. The county health officer, summoned that same evening, would later write to a colleague in Richmond. His letter, preserved in the Virginia Historical Society, described what he found as beyond comprehension, a violation of every natural law. But in 1923, in rural Virginia, there were truths too disturbing to speak aloud, realities that communities chose to bury rather than confront. The investigation into the Hartley family required understanding how such an arrangement could develop unnoticed. Sheriff Crane dispatched Deputy Wendell to the county clerk's office, where birth records told the beginning of the story. The triplets entered the world during a blizzard on January 7, 1894. The attending midwife, Sarah Drummond, noted in her personal journal that Nadine Hartley's labor lasted 31 hours. Edmund Hartley, the father, had to ride through waist-deep snow to fetch help. By the time they returned, Nadine had delivered 2 of the boys herself. Mrs. Drummond's journal entry, preserved by her descendants, described Edmund as overcome with terror at the sight of identical sons, believing them touched by something unnatural. Edmund farmed tobacco on 60 acres inherited from his father. Tax records show modest but steady income. The family attended Hebron Baptist Church irregularly. Pastor's logs mention the Hartleys only twice before 1901, both times noting Edmund's request for prayers regarding his wife's melancholic disposition. The boys were 7 when everything changed. On November 3, 1901, a fire consumed the tobacco barn while Edmund worked inside, repairing storm damage. The coroner's report attributed death to smoke inhalation. Local newspaper accounts described attempts to rescue him, but the structure collapsed before help arrived. Witnesses stated that Nadine stood watching the blaze with unusual stillness, the 3 boys gripping her skirts, mirror images of each other in their identical grief. After Edmund's burial, Nadine withdrew. Store ledgers from Churchville General Mercantile show her last personal appearance in December 1901. From that point forward, only the boys made purchases, always one of them, never together. Rotating in a pattern merchants found curious, but not alarming. Census records from 1910 list the household occupants correctly, but note children educated at home by mother. The truancy officer visited twice. His reports, filed with the county superintendent, indicate Nadine demonstrated adequate teaching materials, and the boys could read and write proficiently. The officer noted their peculiar habit of finishing each other's sentences, but found no legal grounds for intervention. Neighbors interviewed after the 1923 discovery provided fragmentary memories. Ezra Caldwell, who farmed adjacent property, recalled seeing the 3 boys always dressed identically, working tobacco rows in perfect synchronization. They moved like one creature with 3 bodies, he told investigators. Never spoke unless spoken to first. When they did talk, their voices blended together in a way that made your skin crawl. Margaret Finch, the schoolteacher in Churchville, kept detailed diaries throughout her 40-year career. Her entry from May 1902 expressed concern about the Hartley boys' absence from school. She attempted a home visit, but found Nadine unwilling to engage. "The woman has retreated into herself," Miss Finch wrote. "Those boys are being raised in a tomb of grief." Church attendance records show the family stopped coming to services entirely after 1903. Reverend Samuel Kemp made pastoral visits in 1904 and 1907, but his notes indicate Nadine refused entry both times, speaking through a cracked door. The isolation deepened year by year. By 1915, when the triplets reached adulthood, they existed as ghosts in the community. People knew the Hartley farm endured, knew someone maintained the tobacco crop, but the family itself became more legend than reality. What no one understood was how isolation had allowed Nadine to reshape reality itself within those walls, to build a world where her grief and need had twisted natural bonds into something monstrous. The seeds of what Sheriff Crane discovered in 1923 were planted in 1894, watered by Edmund's death, and cultivated in absolute seclusion for 22 years. Sheriff Crane's official report to the county commissioners used language so carefully sanitized it bordered on meaningless. Conditions requiring immediate intervention and violations of moral standards told the public nothing. The truth remained locked in private correspondence that wouldn't surface for 60 years. Dr. Harold Vance conducted the medical examinations 3 days after the initial discovery. His letter to Dr. Theodore Ashworth, a psychiatrist colleague in Richmond, broke professional detachment entirely. "I have practiced medicine for 23 years, Vance wrote. "I believed myself prepared for any depravity rural isolation might produce. I was wrong." The arrangement within the Hartley household followed a rotation system of disturbing precision. A handwritten schedule, discovered tacked to the kitchen wall, divided each week into equal segments. Lester took Sunday through Tuesday. Walter claimed Wednesday and Thursday. Vernon occupied Friday and Saturday. The schedule governed everything: sleeping arrangements, meals, even conversation. The brothers adhered to it with religious devotion. Nadine, when questioned by Dr. Vance, showed no comprehension that anything was irregular. Her mind had fractured years earlier, though whether before or after establishing this structure remained unclear. She spoke of sacred duty and keeping the family whole. She referenced biblical passages twisted beyond recognition, claiming divine instruction for her son's arrangement. The brothers themselves proved even more disturbing in their complete normalcy about the situation. Separated for individual interviews, each provided identical accounts without shame or hesitation. Lester explained the rotation with mechanical precision, describing how their mother instituted the system when they turned 16. "Father left us," he stated flatly. "Mother needed us to become men, all 3 of us. It was our obligation." Walter's testimony contained the same matter-of-fact tone. He described their daily life as if discussing crop rotation or livestock management. The schedule prevented jealousy, he explained. Everything equal, everything fair. When the county attorney asked if he understood why others might find this arrangement disturbing, Walter appeared genuinely confused by the question. Vernon provided the only glimpse into dissent. At 16, he had questioned their mother about the arrangement. "I thought about leaving," he admitted, "going to Richmond, finding work." But Nadine convinced him that abandoning his brothers would destroy them, that his absence would unbalance everything. The guilt had been overwhelming. He never raised the question again. Dr. Vance's examination of Nadine revealed physical deterioration consistent with her age, but her mental state defied easy categorization. She displayed lucid moments where she discussed household management rationally, then slipped into rambling monologues about duty and sacrifice. She had constructed an elaborate theological justification, drawing from scripture, funeral sermons for Edmund, and her own desperate need for control. The house itself bore witness to the arrangement's rigid structure. 3 separate sleeping areas had been established in different rooms, each meticulously maintained. A calendar marked in 3 different colored inks tracked the rotation. Nadine's room contained tokens from each son, gifts presented during their designated times, arranged in perfect symmetry. Commonwealth Attorney Benjamin Rourke faced an unprecedented legal challenge. Virginia law in 1923 lacked specific statutes. Addressing this situation, existing morality laws assumed certain arrangements occurred outside family structures. The case required proving criminal behavior within a context where traditional definitions failed. More troubling still was the question of consent. The brothers were adults, capable of leaving. They stayed voluntarily, believing their arrangement natural and necessary. Nadine's mental deterioration complicated prosecution further. Was she architect of this horror or its victim? broken by grief into creating a twisted replacement for her lost husband. The evidence gathered painted a picture of gradual corruption, isolation allowing grief and need to ferment into something unthinkable. What began in Nadine's shattered mind after Edmund's death had grown year by year into a household where reality itself had been rewritten. The question haunting Sheriff Crane's investigation was simple, yet damning. How had this continued unnoticed for so long? The answer, preserved in church records and town meeting minutes, revealed a community that had chosen willful blindness over uncomfortable intervention. Reverend Samuel Kemp's pastoral journal contained entries spanning 1903 through 1921. His attempted visit in May of 1921 proved particularly illuminating. Approached the Hartley residence with intention to offer spiritual guidance, he wrote. Was met at the property line by one of the triplets, could not discern which. He spoke with disturbing calmness, stating mother receives no visitors. His eyes held something I cannot name, something that made me retreat without pressing further. The Reverend's final entry about the Hartleys, dated June 19, 1921, contained a single line. Some doors are best left closed. Churchville's business district consisted of 7 establishments. The General Mercantile kept meticulous ledgers, and these records told their own story. Beginning in December 1901, purchases appeared monthly under the Hartley name. Always the same items: flour, salt, lamp oil, fabric for clothing. Always paid in cash, always purchased by a single triplet who never engaged in conversation beyond necessary transaction. Store owner Raymond Guthrie recorded his observations in margins of the ledger. The Hartley boy, whichever one, moves like clockwork. No pleasantries, no weather talk. Places items on counter, pays exact amount, leaves. Have never seen 2 of them together in town. A later notation from 1917 read, curious that 3 grown men need identical shirts, identical trousers, all same size, always in 3s. Town council meetings from 1905 through 1922 never mentioned the Hartley family directly, but oblique references appeared. A discussion about truancy laws in 1908 included a councilman's comment about isolated families educating children at home beyond our oversight. The motion to strengthen enforcement failed. Deputy Wendell's interviews with longtime residents uncovered a pattern of deliberate ignorance. Farmers whose land bordered the Hartley property described seeing the triplets working tobacco fields, but never approaching to speak. Something about them discouraged neighborliness, Ezra Caldwell admitted. They wanted no contact, and we obliged them. Martha Yancey, who operated Churchville's post office, revealed that mail delivery to the Hartley farm ceased in 1906 when the postal carrier reported feeling threatened, though no threats were spoken. The family never complained about the suspension. Most damning were the rumors. They had circulated for years, whispered conversations at church socials, speculation among women at quilting circles. The nature of the brothers' relationship with their mother had been guessed at, wondered about, discussed in hushed tones. Yet no one acted. Dr. Vance discovered this during his interviews. You suspected? He asked Martha Yancey directly. Her response captured the community's collective failure. We wondered, but what were we to do? March onto their property uninvited? Accuse a grieving widow based on suspicion? The Hartleys kept to themselves. They weren't bothering anyone. Margaret Finch's diary contained the most honest assessment. In an entry from September 1920, she wrote, "I think we all knew something was deeply wrong at that farm. We chose comfort over courage. We told ourselves it wasn't our business. Now I wonder if our silence made us complicit in whatever darkness grew there." The tobacco cooperative records showed the Hartley farm maintained steady production through all those years. Crops were delivered, payments collected. The farm functioned normally by all economic measures, and this surface normalcy provided cover for the corruption beneath. Sheriff Crane compiled these findings into a supplemental report that never reached public record. His conclusion was stark. The community had traded moral responsibility for peace of mind, allowing isolation to shield horrors they suspected but refused to confront. Rural Virginia in the early 20th century valued privacy above intervention, quietness above scandal. The Hartleys had weaponized these values perfectly. Sheriff Crane's expanded investigation revealed layers of psychological manipulation that made the case more disturbing than any physical evidence could convey. His handwritten notes, discovered in 1978, when his grandson donated them to the Augusta County Historical Society, documented what he termed the systematic destruction of 3 human souls. Dr. Vance conducted extensive interviews with each brother separately, seeking to understand how grown men could accept such an arrangement as normal. The sessions, held over 2 weeks in late March, exposed conditioning that had begun in childhood and intensified after their 16th birthday. Lester's account provided the framework. After their father's death, Nadine had stopped sleeping. The boys would find her wandering the house at night, weeping. She spoke constantly of Edmund, how she needed him, how incomplete she felt. When the triplets turned 16, she gathered them together and explained that they must become men now, must fulfill the role Edmund left vacant. "She said we were 3 parts of father," Lester explained, "that together we could be what she needed, that God sent us as triplets for this purpose." The brothers had accepted this reasoning without question. They knew no other perspective. Nadine controlled all information entering the household, all understanding of the outside world. She read them selected Bible passages about duty and sacrifice, about honoring one's mother. She created a theological framework where their arrangement became divine mandate. Walter described the rotation system's origin. Nadine had instituted it to prevent jealousy, she claimed. Each brother would have equal time, equal responsibility. The schedule wasn't constraint, but fairness, ensuring none felt favored or neglected. "She made it seem like we were protecting each other," Walter said, "like the schedule kept us unified." Vernon's testimony revealed the punishment for resistance. When he had questioned the arrangement at 16, Nadine had collapsed, clutching her chest, claiming his rejection was killing her. She had wept for 3 days, refusing food, stating she wanted to die if her sons found her unworthy. The other brothers had begged Vernon to relent. The guilt had been unbearable. Dr. Vance's analysis, shared with Sheriff Crane, identified textbook manipulation tactics. Nadine had isolated the boys completely, ensuring they developed no external relationships that might challenge her narrative. She had bound them through guilt, making her well-being contingent on their compliance. She had normalized the abnormal through repetition and religious justification. The physical evidence supported this psychological architecture. Nadine's room contained journals dating back to 1902, filled with rambling entries about destiny and divine purpose. She had convinced herself, through years of isolation and grief, that her arrangement was not only acceptable, but ordained. The journals showed her mental deterioration alongside her growing conviction. Medical examination of Nadine herself revealed early-stage dementia, but Dr. Vance believed her condition had worsened an already disordered mind rather than causing it. The pathology preceded the disease, he wrote. Grief broke her after Edmund's death. She rebuilt herself around a delusion, then spent 20 years fortifying it. The brothers displayed symptoms consistent with long-term psychological abuse: inability to recognize their situation as abnormal, complete emotional dependence on their mother, lack of individual identity separate from their triplet status. They had been shaped, year by year, into extensions of Nadine's needs rather than autonomous individuals. What made the case particularly tragic was the brothers' intelligence. They were not mentally deficient. They read, managed farm operations competently, handled financial transactions. Their conditioning was so complete precisely because they possessed the capacity to have resisted. Had they been given any alternative framework for understanding family, duty, and love? Sheriff Crane's notes from April 2nd contained a single devastating observation. These men are prisoners who don't know they're imprisoned. They were locked inside their mother's madness before they could understand what freedom meant. Commonwealth Attorney Benjamin Rourke faced a legal nightmare unlike any in Virginia's criminal history. His correspondence with the State Attorney General's office, preserved in Richmond's legal archives, chronicles a prosecutor's struggle against laws never designed for such a case. Virginia's morality statutes in 1923 addressed fornication, adultery, and sodomy, but these laws assumed unrelated parties. Incest statutes covered parent-child relations, but were written with the assumption of force or coercion against minors. The Hartley brothers were adults who participated willingly, who defended the arrangement when questioned. Rourke's letter to Attorney General John Saunders, dated March 28th, laid out his dilemma. How do we prosecute consent given under conditions that make true consent impossible? The brothers believe they act freely, yet their entire understanding of morality was shaped by the woman we seek to charge. They are both victims and perpetrators, neither fully culpable nor entirely innocent. The state's response offered little guidance. Existing precedent dealt with clear-cut cases: forced relations, relations with minors, relations obtained through obvious deception. The Hartley situation fit none of these categories cleanly. Saunders suggested pursuing charges under general morality provisions. Acknowledging the legal foundation was uncertain. More challenging still was the evidentiary problem. Proving the arrangement required testimony that would devastate the community's reputation. Newspaper editors in Staunton and Charlottesville had already gotten wind of the case. Rourke met with them privately, requesting discretion. His notes from those meetings reveal the bargain struck. Papers would report moral violations without specifics, protecting both the victims and the community from salacious exposure. The Staunton Daily Leader's coverage from April 19th exemplified this agreement. A case of moral turpitude in Augusta County has resulted in charges against a local family. Details are withheld to protect the dignity of those involved. Commonwealth Attorney Rourke assures the public that justice will be served within proper bounds. This vagueness served multiple purposes. It prevented scandal while allowing legal proceedings to continue. It protected the brothers from becoming spectacles. But it also meant the full truth would never reach public consciousness, allowing similar situations to potentially continue elsewhere without warning. Judge Harrison Pembroke, assigned to the case, expressed private reservations in chambers. His clerk's notes, discovered during courthouse renovations in 1968, captured his concerns. We walk a tightrope between justice and mercy. These brothers are victims, yet the law sees them as adults who made choices. We must punish evil without destroying those already destroyed by it. Rourke structured his prosecution carefully. He would charge Nadine with corrupting morals and maintaining a disorderly house, charges broad enough to encompass the situation without requiring explicit testimony. The brothers would receive suspended sentences conditional on separating and leaving the county, a solution that removed them from Nadine's influence without imprisoning victims. Defense counsel, appointed by the court, argued for Nadine's mental incompetence. Her deteriorated state was obvious to anyone who observed her. She rambled in court about divine purposes, about Edmund's ghost guiding her, about her son's sacred duty. The spectacle convinced observers that whatever evil had occurred, its architect was now beyond rational judgment. The legal maneuvering consumed 6 weeks. Behind closed doors, attorneys negotiated outcomes that satisfied justice's appearance while avoiding trials that would require detailed testimony. Rural Virginia in 1923 valued reputation above revelation. The community wanted the Hartleys dealt with and forgotten, not examined and exposed. Rourke's final report to the county commissioners, filed in early May, contained calculated understatement. The matter has been resolved in a manner protecting public morals while respecting the dignity of all involved. Further details serve no constructive purpose. The truth would remain sealed for half a century, locked away where it couldn't disturb the community's carefully maintained peace. The trial transcripts, sealed by court order until 1973, contained testimony so disturbing that even legal professionals struggled to maintain composure. What made the brothers' words truly chilling was not graphic detail, but rather their complete absence of shame or recognition that anything was wrong. The proceedings took place over 3 days in early June. Judge Pembroke cleared the courtroom of all spectators, except necessary court personnel. A stenographer, Miss Eleanor Pritchett, recorded every word. Her personal diary, donated to the Virginia Historical Society after her death, described the experience as listening to men describe hell as if it were paradise. Lester testified first. Commonwealth Attorney Rourke approached questioning carefully, establishing basic facts without forcing explicit descriptions. "Please explain the household arrangement," he instructed. Lester's response came without hesitation, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. "Mother established a schedule after we turned 16. Sunday through Tuesday belonged to me, Wednesday and Thursday to Walter, Friday and Saturday to Vernon. This prevented jealousy and ensured equality among us." "And what did this schedule govern?" Rourke asked. "Everything. Meals, conversation, sleeping arrangements. Whoever's time it was would stay with Mother, while the others tended farm work or slept in separate rooms. It was the only fair way." Judge Pembroke interjected. "Did you never question this arrangement?" Lester looked genuinely confused by the question. "Why would I? Mother explained it was our duty. Father had died. She needed us to become men. We were 3 parts of what Father had been. Together we could fulfill her needs and keep the family whole." Walter's testimony echoed his brother's with unsettling precision. He described the rotation system with the same mechanical tone, using nearly identical phrasing. When asked if he understood why others might find the arrangement disturbing, Walter paused, then answered, "People outside don't understand duty. They don't understand what it means to put family first. Mother taught us that sacrifice is love's truest form." The most revealing testimony came from Vernon. Rourke, sensing the youngest triplet harbored some buried doubt, pressed harder. "You mentioned once questioning the arrangement. Tell the court about that." Vernon's composure cracked slightly. I was 16, just beginning my time on the schedule. I felt wrong about it, though I couldn't explain why. I told Mother I was thinking about leaving, finding work in Richmond. What happened? She collapsed, grabbed her chest, said I was killing her. She cried for 3 days straight, wouldn't eat, kept saying she wanted to die if we found her so repulsive. Lester and Walter begged me to apologize, to promise I'd stay. They said I was destroying the family, that my selfishness would leave Mother alone and helpless. So you relented? I did. The guilt was unbearable. I realized then that leaving would be the cruelest thing I could do. Mother had already lost Father. Losing us would finish her. Rourke leaned forward. Vernon, do you understand now that what occurred in that house was not normal? Vernon met his gaze directly. I understand that you believe it was wrong, but we kept Mother from complete despair. We gave her reason to live. Isn't that what sons are supposed to do? The courtroom sat in stunned silence. These were not defiant criminals or broken victims, but something more disturbing. Men so thoroughly conditioned, they had internalized their abuse as virtue. Dr. Vance, called as expert witness, provided clinical context. What we observe in these men is complete moral recalibration. Their mother didn't merely abuse them. She rebuilt their entire ethical framework, replacing conventional morality with a system where serving her needs became the highest good. They genuinely believe they acted lovingly. Judge Pembroke's final question to the brothers revealed his own struggle. If given the choice now, knowing how others view your situation, would you choose differently? All three brothers answered in unison, no. That single word contained more horror than any explicit testimony could have conveyed. Nadine Hartley was transferred to Western State Hospital in Staunton on June 15, 1923. The psychiatric evaluation conducted there provided the final pieces of understanding about how one woman's broken mind had created such profound damage. Dr. Frances Pembroke, one of Virginia's few female psychiatrists, took charge of Nadine's assessment. Her report, archived at the hospital until its closure, documented a mind caught between calculation and delusion, where grief had fermented into something far darker. The initial examination found Nadine lucid in some areas, completely detached in others. She could recall precise details about household management, farm finances, the boys' childhood illnesses. But when questioned about the arrangement with her sons, she slipped into rambling theological justifications that made little coherent sense. God took Edmund from me, she told Dr. Pembroke during their first session. But God is just. He wouldn't leave me alone. He gave me 3 sons for a reason, 3 parts of one whole. They were Edmund's gift to me, meant to fill the void he left. Dr. Pembroke pressed further. Did you understand that what you asked of your sons was inappropriate? Nadine's response revealed the depth of her self-deception. Inappropriate? I saved them. Without me, they would have scattered, lived empty lives alone. I kept them together. I gave them purpose. They love me, Doctor. They chose to stay. The journals seized from her room told a more complex story. Early entries from 1902 showed a woman drowning in grief, writing desperate prayers for relief. By 1905, the entries shifted. She began interpreting the triplets' identical appearance as divine sign, writing, 3 faces of one soul. Edmund divided and returned to me. The transformation accelerated after 1908. Entries became more grandiose, claiming she received direct instruction from God about her son's purpose. She copied Bible verses about Ruth's devotion, Abraham's sacrifice, twisted their meanings to support her emerging worldview. Dr. Pembroke's diagnosis noted early-stage dementia, but concluded the psychiatric disturbance predated any organic brain disease. Mrs. Hartley suffered a psychotic break following her husband's death, the report stated. Rather than recovering, she built an elaborate delusional system that allowed her to function while remaining fundamentally detached from reality. The dementia merely accelerated an existing pathology. Physical examination revealed malnutrition and signs of self-neglect. Nadine had focused entirely on maintaining control over her sons while allowing herself to deteriorate. She weighed barely 90 pounds. Her teeth were rotting. She bore marks consistent with chronic stress. During her second week at Western State, Nadine experienced a moment of clarity that haunted Dr. Pembroke for years. Without prompting, Nadine suddenly asked, "What have I done to my boys?" Dr. Pembroke seized the opening. "You subjected them to an arrangement no mother should impose. You used their love against them." Nadine stared at her hands for a long moment. "I was so alone. Edmund left me alone. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't—" Her voice trailed off, then hardened again. "No, they wanted to help me. They chose it. I gave them purpose." The clarity vanished as quickly as it appeared, swallowed back into delusion. It was the only time Nadine acknowledged wrongdoing. Subsequent sessions proved futile. Nadine retreated into religious mania, spending hours reciting distorted scripture. She refused to discuss her sons, claiming they would return for her once the world stopped lying about us. Dr. Pembroke's final assessment was bleak. Mrs. Hartley cannot be rehabilitated. Her delusion is too fundamental to her identity. Forcing her to confront reality would likely result in complete psychological collapse. She will live and die believing she acted righteously. The question that haunted investigators was whether Nadine had consciously manipulated her sons or genuinely believed her own justifications. Dr. Pembroke concluded it was both. She began with grief-driven need, rationalized it through delusion, then convinced herself so thoroughly that calculation became conviction. By the time her sons reached adulthood, she had forgotten she was lying. Nadine would spend 4 years at Western State, growing progressively more detached, before dying in April of 1927. Her death certificate listed pneumonia, but Dr. Pembroke's notes suggested she had simply stopped fighting to live once separated from her sons. Judge Pembroke delivered his ruling on June 23, 1923. The courtroom remained closed to the public, only attorneys and court officials present to witness Justice's awkward attempt to address the inaddressable. Nadine received indefinite commitment to Western State Hospital, a sentence that satisfied legal requirements while acknowledging her mental incompetence. The brothers faced a more delicate judgment. Pembroke granted suspended sentences on 3 conditions. They must separate permanently, leave Augusta County within 30 days, and maintain no contact with each other for a minimum of 5 years. "This court recognizes you as victims," Pembroke stated, addressing the triplets directly. "But you cannot heal while remaining together. Your identity as individuals was stolen. You must reclaim it separately, or not at all." The brothers accepted the terms without protest, though their faces showed confusion rather than relief. They had been freed from a prison they didn't recognize as one. County records tracked their dispersal. Lester moved to McDowell County, West Virginia, finding work in the coal mines near Welch. His employment records show steady work until March of 1935, when a shaft collapse killed him and 4 other miners. He was 41. His death certificate listed no next of kin. Walter relocated to Baltimore, Maryland, taking a job at a textile factory. City directories place him at a boarding house on Eastern Avenue through 1928. In 1930, he married a widow named Catherine Brennan. The marriage license application, preserved in Baltimore archives, shows Walter listed his family as deceased. He worked at the same factory for 26 years, dying of a heart attack in 1956 at age 62. His obituary mentioned his wife and 2 stepchildren, but made no reference to brothers or Virginia origins. Vernon's path proved darkest. He attempted work at a lumber mill in Harrisonburg, but suffered a psychological breakdown within 5 months. Witnesses reported he would speak to empty chairs, addressing them as Lester and Walter, asking if it was their turn yet. In January of 1924, authorities committed him to Central State Hospital in Petersburg. Medical records from Central State documented Vernon's complete inability to function independently. He remained fixated on the rotation schedule, becoming distressed when he couldn't determine whose turn it was. He asked repeatedly about his mother, whether she was being cared for properly. Staff noted he seemed incapable of understanding he was free. Vernon spent 37 years institutionalized. He never recovered enough for release. Hospital records show he remained docile and cooperative, but perpetually confused about his circumstances. He died in November of 1961, 3 months before his 68th birthday. The cause of death was listed as pneumonia, but his attending physician noted, patient had ceased trying to make sense of a world that contradicted everything he believed true. The Hartley farm stood empty after their departure. The county attempted to auction it in 1924, but no buyers emerged. Local superstition deemed the property cursed. Vandals stripped what they could, and nature reclaimed the rest. In 1945, the farmhouse burned. The fire department's report attributed it to lightning, but elderly residents later admitted someone had set it deliberately. "We wanted it gone," Ezra Caldwell confessed decades afterward. "Every time we passed that place, we felt shame for not acting sooner. Burning it felt like burning away our guilt." The land eventually reverted to the county for unpaid taxes. It remained vacant, gradually absorbed into adjacent properties. By 1960, nothing remained but foundation stones and a chimney, barely visible through undergrowth. Of the 3 brothers, only Walter achieved anything resembling normal life, and even he had done so by erasing his past entirely. Lester died in darkness underground. Vernon died in an institution, his mind never escaping the farmhouse that had imprisoned it. Their mother's manipulation had destroyed them so thoroughly that separation, intended as salvation, became simply another form of suffering. For 50 years, the Hartley case existed only as rumor and sealed documents. The community that had witnessed its resolution chose collective amnesia, protecting itself from uncomfortable truths about what silence had allowed. Dr. Ellen Pritchard stumbled upon the case accidentally in 1973. A historian researching rural Virginia court records during the early 20th century, she was examining files in Augusta County's courthouse basement when she discovered a sealed box marked Hartley Vavoy Commonwealth, 1923. The seal had been mandated by Judge Pembroke's order not to be opened for 50 years. That period had just expired. Pritchard obtained permission from the county clerk and broke the seal on a September afternoon, expecting routine legal proceedings. What she found left her shaken. Trial transcripts, psychiatric evaluations, Sheriff Crane's suppressed reports, Dr. Vance's correspondence, all documenting a case that contradicted everything she thought she knew about rural communities and family structures. Pritchard's subsequent academic paper, published in the Journal of Southern Legal History in 1974, presented the case objectively, but couldn't disguise her horror. The Hartley case reveals how isolation, grief, and community complicity can create conditions for sustained abuse, she wrote. More disturbing still is how thoroughly the truth was buried, not by accident, but by deliberate choice. The publication sparked debate within academic circles. Sociologists examined how communities protect themselves through selective blindness. Legal scholars discussed the inadequacy of 1920s statutes for addressing psychological manipulation. Psychologists studied the transcripts as examples of extreme conditioning. But outside academic journals, the case remained largely unknown. Local newspapers declined to revisit the story. Augusta County residents who remembered the original events had no desire to discuss it. The Hartley name had been successfully erased from collective memory. Pritchard attempted to locate surviving family members. Walter had died in 1956, his widow in 1968. His stepchildren knew nothing of his Virginia origins. Vernon's institutional records provided no connections to living relatives. Lester had died without family. The bloodline had ended, taking its secrets to scattered graves. The farmland itself bore no marker. Pritchard visited the site in 1974, finding only overgrown fields and scattered foundation stones. Neighbors she interviewed refused to specify which property had belonged to the Hartleys, as if naming it might resurrect what they had worked so hard to forget. In 1992, the Augusta County Historical Society erected a small marker on Route 11 near where the farm road once branched off. It read simply, "Former Hartley property, 1880 through 1923. No mention of what occurred there, no explanation of its significance, just an acknowledgement that something had existed and was now gone. The case raises questions that transcend its specific horror. How many similar situations remained hidden in isolated communities? How often did collective silence enable abuse? What responsibility do communities bear for evils they suspect but refuse to confront? Pritchard concluded her paper with an observation that haunts everyone who encounters this case. The Hartley brothers were destroyed not once but twice. First by their mother's manipulation, then by a legal system that separated them without providing tools to build new identities. We failed them completely, from beginning to end. The story of the Hartley triplets remains one of Virginia's darkest chapters, a reminder that the worst horrors often occur not in darkness, but in plain sight, sustained by communities that choose comfort over courage. If this story disturbed you as much as it should, if it made you question how silence enables suffering, then we've done our job uncovering these buried truths. These cases matter because they show us the consequences of looking away. Click the like button to help this story reach others who need to understand how complicity works. Subscribe to the channel because history's most important lessons are the ones we'd rather forget. Share this video with someone who believes small communities are always innocent, who thinks isolation protects rather than endangers. The Hartley brothers can't speak for themselves anymore. We have to speak for them.